Why do you think Around the Horn has such a communal feeling to it? Because from its description, it doesn't seem like the type of show that lends itself to having such a strong connection to its audience. Like I don't
Right.
know if that's what even ESPN executives set out for when they came up with the
Yeah.
idea for Around the Horn.
Yeah, I think people can see themselves in it, maybe, if I were to take 3 steps back. We had the old person, that's my uncle, or see them and then family in it. That's my uncle. That's me. I'm the young guy. All right. Just I'm taking this off of what I've heard, the wonderful words of people like Nick Wright and or David Dennis on our show, who have said things like this was a show where I saw myself in it for the first time, and I began to imagine that. And so that I think is part of it. Um, I mean, we all attach to different things. I don't know. This is, I think people saw themselves in the many different characters we could have put out there. And I don't use character in a cartoon character way, although we can always lean into our cartoon characters, I guess. But just in what we put out there. And then the other is intentional on my part. I wanted to make a show that feels. It took me a while to get there. I made a show that was stat heavy. I made a show that was, but I wanted to make a show that was a feeling, you know. And I think those are the shows I love. The feeling of how I felt watching that show, but I also felt the people behind it. So I think we gave them that. I mean, I can go back and think of any number of times we went really personal, and I did that personally, intentionally, I should say, and I think it opened the door for our panelists to do that. I mean, Woody Page talked about suicidal ideation on our show, and that is heavy stuff. And it's real stuff, and it's important stuff. And it was a conversation, of course, that came from sports. I know what we can say. Around the Horn did too much of this or too much of that. We've done 50,000 topics in 23 years, right? 9 or 10 topics a show, you know, for 230 episodes a year for 23 years. So what are we talking about? 5, 10, 20, 100, 1,000 times we went to a place that maybe met somebody that said, "Oh, this was too sad or too political or too." That's 1,000 of 50,000, 2% of our topics. You know, I'm of the mind. You're in a conversation about anything. You're in a conversation about everything. You're not going to be talking with your friends, and they're going to bring up talking about movies, and then they're going to be talking about food. Wait a second, I'm not talking about food. We're having a movie conversation here. I can't possibly allow for. I know I'm making it very banal, but you know, I think we opened up our hearts a little bit, and then the viewers kind of appreciated that.
Yeah, you mentioned opening up your hearts and having some of those heavy conversations.
Yeah,
You were open about losing one of your
yeah,
twins.
mm-hmm.
You've been open about having anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
addressing anxiety. You're open about your faith. You're obviously known for being on TV with ashes on your forehead on Ash Wednesday. Have you always been comfortable sharing so much with so many?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, my only oversharing is an expression people use now. I'm mindful of what that is. Um, I also know not everybody is always ready for the information you're about to give them. So part of the job of hosting and talent of communication is kind of preparing people for those conversations, which is a slow progress. And I think that's another thing that I was intentional about. We're talking over years of Around the Horn. Um, and then I think if I'm going to live through something, I know someone else may be living through something. Why wouldn't I make their life, if I could, easier, or just make them aware more of one way they can live their life, right? And that's how I thought about it. Um, I appreciate that part of the job, and it is part of the job, without any question for me. How I'm I like going on Twitter, and I like hearing what people are saying, and I like responding to people who see it differently than me, and showing people and modeling how you could still have a conversation. I've got millions of people who reach out. Oh, exaggeration, but there, I don't know how many of my followers are real and how many are bots. But of the 1,000 people, I'm pretty sure that are following me on Twitter, I think they know they can get a real response from me that is not going to be coming from a place of edge. I'm not going to bring an edge to it, but of logic and of how I see the world. I try to start every tweet in my mind or every response on the Around the Horn with that's touching on a place that I know I'm moving a conversation forward that maybe not everybody's with me with, if that makes sense. Is well, I see it like this. In my mind, this is how I see it, right? And it's a small minor thing that doesn't really register to people, but once you establish, I know you can see this a different way. I know you could be coming from a different place. I know my experience. I would never assume my experience is what everybody's is. Once you establish that from the start, and that's establishing it with neutrality, I think you should be allowed to go wherever you want. And I felt that way about Around the Horn too, in broadly. That's how we would do topics.